How to fabricate a lie. I'm going to show you here in this story by the Daily Beast how to fabricate a lie with just a handful of local Democrat politicians, some activists, and a reporter willing to lie on behalf of the Democratic Party. Florida schools will teach how slavery brought personal benefit to black people. Story by Allison Quinn. Read through this story with me and tell me if you can spot the lies. First sentence of the story. Middle school students in Florida will soon be taught that slavery gave black people a personal development because they developed skills. After the Florida Board of Education approved new standards for African American history, high school students will be taught an equally distorted message that a deadly white mob attack against black residents of Ocoee, Florida in 1920 included acts of violence perpetrated against and by African Americans. Dozens of black residents were killed in the massacre, which was perpetrated to stop them from voting. Notice how they left something out there? That's right. White Democrats in 1920 wanted to prevent blacks from voting Republican. According to members of the board, that distorted portrayal of the racist massacre is factually accurate. State Representative Anna Escamani, Democrat. I am very concerned by these standards, especially some of the notion that enslaved people benefited from being enslaved. You notice anything missing there? She doesn't provide an example. She doesn't provide proof. When you look at the history currently, it suggests that the Ocoee massacre was sparked by violence from African Americans. That's blaming the victim. A community member says, telling kids that slavery was beneficial, because I guarantee you it most certainly was not. Florida Department of Education's chancellor denied the new standards portrayed slavery as beneficial. And in closing, the president and CEO of the NAACP, who lives in Florida, says we refuse to go back. We reached the end of the story, and the headline says slavery brought personal benefit to black people. The first sentence of the article says that. Then, various Democrat representatives in this state repeat the charge. The notion that enslaved people benefited from being enslaved, says a Democrat. Guess what's missing? Not one example. No proof at all. So you have a handful of local Democrats who repeat a charge. This is picked up by a friendly reporter from the Daily Beast. Now look at the Washington Examiner. To their credit, they went and checked the curriculum, and they found there's no basis for the allegation by local Democrats against this state's new curriculum. The media has spread almost every falsehood imaginable about what his anti-woke educational policies actually do. Notice the difference here. MSN.com lists this as opinion, but here it's simple reporting. Well, if Allison Quinn was a journalist, she should have actually provided examples of what her headline and the opening sentence of her story said. She provides no examples. I wonder why. So Washington Examiner has to be opinion to refute the reporting. Interesting distinction there. Critics claim the curriculum portrays slavery as beneficial to black people. The word beneficial, however, does not appear anywhere in the document in relation to slavery. The guidelines do not by any stretch of the imagination describe slavery as a positive thing. Another controversial passage reads, instruction will include acts of violence perpetrated against and by African Americans, but is not limited to the 1906 Atlanta race riot, 1919 Washington, D.C. race riot, 1920 Ocoee massacre, 1921 Tulsa massacre, and the 1923 Rosewood massacre. This is where a local Florida Democrat state senator claimed this was saying African Americans did the massacre. That's blaming the victim. You remember I quoted this person in the Daily Beast story. So there's no basis here. The newspaper Florida Phoenix misquoted the standards. So all you need is a few local Democrats to lie about a bill. You get a friendly reporter to repeat the lie. Now, what's the kicker on this? Here are the date of this story, 14 hours ago. It doesn't matter that the story was refuted in the same time frame. All that matters is that the national news service, in this case NBC News, picks up the story. Antonio Planas of NBC News relays the entire allegation of the previous reporting. He doesn't do any fact-checking because he's a Democratic Party activist, and everyone employed by NBC News and the Daily Beast are also Democratic Party activists. There's no need to check this story. It fits the narrative that these reporters arrived at before they even saw the story. There is no basis in fact in any of this, but now that it's a national news story, it will never, ever go away. This is how you fabricate a lie, and this is how the Democratic Party maintains power. By the way, in the original miniseries Roots, the final episode shows the scene where the former slaves have left Virginia and have moved to Tennessee. Tom Moore, the slave who was a blacksmith under their old master, is now a free man who will continue his trade of being a blacksmith, working for himself and his own family. So this is a historical example of someone who took skills he had as a slave, being a blacksmith, and guess what? He used those skills as a free man. That's American civics. The Democratic Party doesn't want to teach you American civics because they don't want you to know that every Jim Crow law that was ever written was passed into law in order to prevent African Americans from voting Republican. The Democratic Party will not let you find out that the National Rifle Association gave marksmanship training to African Americans during the 1920s so that they could protect themselves from the white Democrats trying to murder and lynch them. The Democratic Party will not tell you that it was white Democrats who enslaved African Americans and profited off the sweat of another man's brow. And in 2023, those same white Democrats entrap African Americans in public housing, provide cheap and freely available recreational drugs like crack cocaine and fentanyl, and they'll abort your black children because white Democrats are still the slave masters and plantation owners that Republicans bled and fought to defeat in 1865. Remember that when you hear about racist Republicans.